Welcome to the Eventful Podcast, where real conversations meet big ideas.
This is where the real journey gets shared.
It's honest,
It's inspiring.
and it's always eventful.
So I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest. It's someone that has become a dear friend of mine, but I've met through the industry and I admire tremendously. So I'd love to introduce everyone to Elisa Maggio, who's the head of trade marketing at the Weather Company.
Hi, how are you
Well,
guys?
We're good.
Good. We're so excited to have you here. Thanks for taking the
having me.
time. Yes, we have a lot to talk about, but maybe do you first want to give us a little bit of background about what you do in your current role?
Sure. Thank you, Mare, for the intro. Yeah, I can expand on that a bit. So, like you shared, I am the head of trade marketing, partnerships, and events at the Weather Company, which you're probably more familiar with the Weather Channel, which is our consumer properties. And I've been here for about 3 years, but have spent a number of years primarily focused on the digital advertising industry across a bunch of different companies, big, small, super big corporate conglomerations like Oracle and IBM and some really small startups as well. And yeah, that's kind of how we met each other, was through the industry. And I don't want to jump the gun a bit. I guess I probably am.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I want to hear a little background on how you and Meredith actually know each other.
Yeah, we go way back, right, Mare?
I'd say almost a decade now, maybe a few
Yeah.
years shy of it, but yes.
That's right. I think it was like 2017. And we met when you were working in house at a MarTech startup in New York. And I was on the ad tech side at a Friendly. And it was sort of like an adjacent partner company. I think it was like our respective founders that actually introduced us and made the intro. But the real sort of bonding moment, I would say, came at my first Cannes Lion, which, if anyone is a fellow event girly that's listening, knows that that's a super intense event. It's definitely trial by fire, your first go out the gate. And I would say that we are trauma bonded over that experience.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, but
Um,
super fun. I'd say it laid the groundwork for our friendship and a lot of mutual respect and lots of like shared hustle and laughs throughout the years.
Well, later on, I am going to ask you guys what's your favorite like story together. So be thinking of it. I know
I
that's
know which one I want to say, but it'll come later.
What's best for public consumption. We'll have to
yeah.
hold
What is
brains.
appropriate
Yeah.
to share? Let's just say that. But so just be thinking about it over the next hours. I'm going to circle back to that because I'm personally curious.
I have a question for you. Career-wise, what brought you into the world of events and trade marketing?
I'll probably date myself here, but I graduated just after the last financial crisis. So at that point, honestly, my biggest goal was landing a job, any job, when so many companies were actively laying off and many in hiring freezes. So at the time, I was living in Boston, and that's where I went to school. And I landed an internship, paid less, at a tech company called Forrester Research. And that turned out to be like a very formative experience, actually, because it sort of laid the baseline for a lot of the tech literacy that I was able to parlay into a number of different jobs and ultimately land in digital advertising. And so I started that role as an intern and then quickly pivoted into their events organization, actually, where events were a product. So they're selling, tickets and sponsorships for major conferences, B2B conferences, like pretty unsexy. But, I'm a hustler and I am always looking for my next parlay, so to speak. And so I was like, okay, events, like I can definitely cut my teeth here and, turn that into something more interesting to me, at least down the line. And so I did a bunch of different roles actually over 5 years or so. And it was everything from planning, operations, logistics, sponsorship execution, sales, even, which, that was one of my very early roles. I think I was making like 80 cold calls a day at one point. And I very quickly learned that I had neither an appetite or aptitude for sales, but it made me a better marketer. Especially like right now, I'm a B2B marketer and I wear the B2B hat. And my biggest internal client, as you guys know, when you used to work in house, is sales. And so having like that, not just theoretical understanding, but like tactical understanding and empathy for the seller experience It's made me a better marketer. But yeah, like I leaned full into events. I kind of took full opportunities there that came with the role. I too felt the gravitational pull toward New York, and I transferred internally. I had a bunch of different roles when I got to New York. But yeah, that was sort of like that was the early days before ultimately, after I left Forrester, I moved into an ad tech startup and then had a bunch of different roles, primarily in the advertising industry ever since.
Yeah, and I think that's actually when I met you, Elisa, is when you were working at that startup. Is that right? You produced, I mean, you still produce, but even back then, you were producing some beautiful events. I remember when Meredith and I worked in-house with, I think the companies were partners. Our companies, were they?
Yeah, no, that's right. I was at a company called Criteo initially, which, like, I would say within advertising, there's obviously such a massive trend toward consolidation. And I've kind of had every experience on the M&A bingo card. So Criteo IPO'd. After that, I worked at a company called Moat that was sold to Oracle. And that's when we met. When I was at Moat, I think we met before it sold, when it was
Yeah,
still
it was the
operating.
year before, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we worked on so many cool events. Like I said, we connected over Cannes, but it was a lot of B2B events, but in advertising, like there is a lot of sizzle there. Although there are trade shows and tech conferences, that kind of thing, but there are also some really cool ones too.
Totally.
Let's dig in a little bit on Can Lion.
Let's do it.
So obviously you mentioned you and Meredith met at Cannes back in the day. I think it's changed so much over the years, but we still see you at Cannes every year now since starting our own business. And I remember a few years ago walking through your space with your current company, and it was beautiful. Like, you guys do the most beautiful design installations. Your internal design team and all of that is so impressive. And of
Thank
course, you're
you.
the one producing it. So you're extremely talented and you guys have
It means
such a
a
cool
lot
presence.
coming from you guys because I
Well,
don't know the handle to a lot of what you guys produce. I will take the compliment.
yeah, I don't know about that. Like, always, and back in the day when Meredith, I remember before meeting you, when Meredith told me about you, she was like, she does the most beautiful events, the coolest stuff. Like, you were doing stuff back at, conferences at Gurney's back when that was very hot and cutting edge. Like, so you've
Actually, at the
always,
Yeah,
surf lodge, Jess, at the surf
oh,
lodge.
at Surf Life. But didn't you do a conference? Didn't you do a conference
it
at
was
Gurney's?
both. Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely both.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
event that
So,
we did grew where we were across a few different venues in Montauk before Montauk exploded. Like it was
right.
definitely on top, of course, but like
Yeah.
it wasn't quite as popular as it is now and Cine.
Yep.
This is like creator economy and influencer takeover and all of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I just remember hearing that and her showing me the pictures like so long ago. And I was like, if we could just do an event in Montauk, so, so cool.
And then you guys did. I came to one of yours that was also at Gurney's.
Well, that's where we met. You came to our event at Gurney's, and that's how you and I eventually met. So,
That's
yes,
right.
my dream of doing an event in the Hamptons, the first event in the Hamptons, came full circle, and that's how we met you. So, or how I met you. Okay, going back to Cannes, because as you mentioned, Cannes is like, I think probably the biggest of the tent pole events in or it's just the most buzzy, the most glitzy, over the top. And I know this year I saw so many influencers like doing panels, and it just like Alex Earl was there and Bethany was there, and like actors and actors, like anybody who is buzzy was there. And I feel like in past years it hasn't been quite as much of that. It seems a little more like, I don't even know. I don't even know how to describe it, but it just seems like a little more like consumer facing or something. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like advertising and media has permeated the collective consciousness, and the creator economy has done a lot on that front. But of course, it's awesome to see the festival grow, and it's a barometer for how the industry is growing, which is awesome.
Mhm.
But it definitely it comes with a set of challenges for an event marketer, especially if you're not working with big budgets like many of the platforms and media companies are. So many are, right? So like a lot of the influencers that you're referencing came with Amazon as an example, and they have that beautiful port that they have stood up over the last couple of years. But yeah, there's just a saturation of programming and really, really good programming. So you got to bring your A game as an event marketer. And especially if you can't cut through the noise when it comes to celebrity power and things like that, you need to be on message and you need to craft really meaningful, high touch experiences that break through and actually deliver value for your brand. So it's definitely getting more and more challenging, but I'm glad that I'm up against it now, 10 plus years into my career versus what baby Meredith and Elisa were up against like back in 2017.
Yeah,
Totally.
that seems very daunting. Like being, at that level in your career 10, 12 years ago and producing something like Can Lion for at that point, like small startup, which you guys were both working separately at. That's kind of crazy. And it feels like the whole festival has changed so much as well.
Yeah. So I was going to say, similar to what you did, I've noticed it's a challenging event unless you're one of the top brands that has an affiliation with a lot of the influencers, because Spotify, of course, gets these amazing performers, but it's Spotify. These artists are on Spotify. Same thing for what's the sports speech one? They had so many different people in the last several years. It's crazy the lineup of speakers and talent that they get. I mean, I think they had Tom Brady this year among so many others.
Absolutely. What Stagwell has done with Sport Beach is incredible in a relatively short period of time. And it's one of the most trafficked and celebrated sort of programming stages within the festival footprint. And so this kind of segues into the sort of partnership hat that I wear. We had an activation presence at Sport Beach this year, and it's like, if you can't beat them, join them. And the nice thing about being at Weather is that we play really nicely in the sandbox with a lot of people. Jess, you were mentioning a couple of years ago, you came and we had our own kind of like standalone space. And that was really exciting and made sense for our business in that specific moment. But now, like, there's just such an oversaturation of programming, and it doesn't make sense for us to further fracture the audience when we could be plugging into these places and spaces that reliably draw audience and deliver really, really exceptional experiences that we know that we can be additive to. So the partnership thing becomes a multiplier if you can kind of like spec out an aligned purpose. And when it comes to something like Weather, right, at a festival where 90% of it takes place outdoors and the heat can be extremely punishing. Like it was on everyone's tongue this year. Like it's such a natural interplay. So we were super, super excited to partner up with the Stagwell folks this year, and they had another blockbuster year.
I love that saying from a sponsorships and collaboration perspective. You can't beat them, join them, because I think we have a lot of clients also in the AI space, and of course, there are so many giants now, right? And we work a lot with sponsorships between those companies because it's hard to stand out from the noise, like in so many different industries in general. And so it provides a really nice opportunity to be able to collaborate through sponsorships or, just sharing space or whatever it is. So I love that mentality.
I admire you in many ways because you're extremely good at strategy. Can I ask you, like, how in advance, for example, like the presence that you've had, and we'll talk about Cannes just as an example, or CES, how long in advance do you figure out what you're going to do that year? Like, I know the year that Jess is talking about, I believe was 2023 when you did your own build out of that space for the gallery. But then how did you figure out this year, let's join people more? Like, I'm curious how that works at Weather, or just how you kind of do that.
I don't know that it's one size fits all, right? Like for a large tentpole like that, we have a playbook that we iterate on, and we know that we want to chip away at it at least like 6 months or so out, right? Because the inventory that you're looking at looks really different if the early bird gets the worm, especially in such a small city where the population balloons the way that it does when the advertising industry descends on it, right? And so there's certain aspects that you got to be first to the puck, like housing and partnerships with the Informa, which is the festival organizer directly, that kind of thing. But then there's the artful part, right? Which is like you set yourself up for the baseline and you hedge, and then you have an agile mindset to see what else comes up. And especially now, Weather used to be owned by IBM, right? Like a massive global cloud computing company with all of the dollars and brand halo that came with that. And now we're owned by private equity. And so, Also, as a side note, our business has never been healthier, but that's just to say, like, the reality of when we can commit and how much we can commit looks really different rather. And so, yeah, you kind of set yourself up and you hedge, and then you roll with the punches and are as dynamic as possible. So the Sport Beach example, for instance, like that was an 11th hour kind of commit that we plugged into. And it was an adjacency play, right, between weather and sports, but also sort of taking a look at the actual forecast and seeing like, yeah, the heat is going to be off the charts this year. And of course, like there's a dynamic element when it comes to the meteorological forecast, but we kind of hedged against that. And so there's like a creative agility, and you guys probably know this better than anyone, where that magic happens if you allow yourself to not just have this rigid, you have to deviate from the playbook, or like you're going to continue to get the same outcome, right?
It's really interesting to hear all of it from your perspective, from such a large company, and your presence and how it's changed over the years in tandem with how the festival itself has changed. So with that note, let's segue into changes. And you've led so much through so much change across roles and industries. And I'm interested to know what has helped you stay grounded during those moments of just maybe chaos or transformation, just craziness.
And I don't know that I'm like particularly adept at it, but I will try to give some like nuggets of wisdom. Hopefully there's something valuable in there. Yeah, like I was mentioning, I've kind of had a bunch of different sort of disruptive experiences that are fairly common right now, right? When it comes to different companies sort of jockeying with each other, especially in a dynamic industry like tech or advertising, or even media. So like I said, I've done the IPO, I've done the sale to a Fortune 500 company, the divestiture from a different Fortune 500 company, you name it, right? And so those can be really, really disruptive, chaotic moments that there's a lot of like upheaval within a team, even if it doesn't lead to like a reduction in force or something like that. It throws the business into a bit of upheaval that can be really paralyzing if you're not able to roll with the punches. And so I worked at a company a while back that had, I think, 4 or 5 like kind of core tenets around the collective culture of the organization. And one of those that really stuck with me, there's a few actually, but one of them was comfort and uncertainty, right? And that whole idea, if you can kind of like stay agile, stay in it, not get paralyzed, and like events are just like one microcosm of that, right? I think that's why we all sort of collectively thrive in the chaos, right? The wrench is inevitable, but the way that you like move through it with like poise, grace, perseverance, and you model that behavior to a team, like that can really pay dividends and right the ship very quickly in rough waters.
Yeah, that's very insightful. And of course, again, everybody knows by now, Meredith and I worked internally. And so navigating just that startup world was kind of, and I know Meredith had gone through an acquisition with her previous company before that. And it's such a wild ride and it's such a roller coaster working internally. And what we see now as well with our clients, because we have, most of our clients are well-funded startups pre-IPO, and then we also have some public companies, right? And so we see the difference, but also the chaos. It's like a different animal, I think, between the two of working at a huge company that might be public or post IPO or something like that. But also these startups, right? It's just kind of like a different beast, and there's chaos and complexity and a lot to navigate in both. But that's something that I think she and I have actually gotten really good at, because our clients really, I mean, everything changes year to year, right? Their budgets change year to year. Their plans change year to year. The way that we track things, the way that we navigate things, we have to be in line with the changes that are actually happening internally at the company, right? Or they have turnover, or they add more people to the team because they get more budget for their team in general. And so it's like a constant thing to navigate, and it gives us appreciation for people who work internally and for our clients, because there's always change. It's constant. I feel like, at least in the industries that we span across, and probably the industry that you work in, not that many people are just like pushing paper anymore. A constant kind of roller coaster of hanging on, and you never really know what's going to happen or what's going to be planned event wise or budget wise or where the company is going year to year. And so we see that a lot with our clients, even though we don't work internally. So I commend you for all the change that you've been a part of through the small companies, the big companies, the acquisitions and all of that, because it's not really part of your job description, but you have to just roll with it and navigate your own career while that is happening. So it's kind of wild.
Yeah, definitely. Do you guys miss it? Do you miss working in house? Obviously, that's an obvious no. Just a softball for you.
I mean, I think there are talk about this a little bit in a different solo episode that we have, but I think that Meredith pipe in if you have some other points. But I think it's a good question. There are so many things that come with running your own business. I know you and Meredith are good friends, so you probably hear a lot about what happens and the things that we have to deal with, because now our job isn't just, not that an events position or something like that isn't a lot of work, but it's also like trying to run the company and manage a team and everything, and the client management on top of that. So it's a lot of different roles all combined into one. So I think there is definitely a stability factor that we miss working internally. However, as we discussed in our first episode, we got laid off. So I think I appreciate the control over sort of it's almost, to me, more stable to have your own thing and run your own business, just because sometimes you, as we just mentioned, like, you don't know what's going to happen with the company where you are. Although some people might argue that it's more stable to work internally. So I don't know. Mare, what's your take on that? I'd be interested.
Well, I think there's just like, when you, to the question is if I miss it, what I miss is, like, I totally agree on what Jess is saying about the stability aspect. I actually feel like I have more control since. However, I do miss some of like the camaraderie of working internally. So what's fun for us now is we talk about this a lot in our first episode, and it'll come into play in a few others, is that we kind of sit as a marketing seat on with a lot of our clients now. So we're kind of involved in a little bit of the camaraderie, but we're not actually a part of the business. So there's certain things sometimes, we're in a meeting, there's clearly missing context. We're trying to put pieces together, like something happened, but we can't quite figure it out. So that, like, I do once again just miss sometimes. I don't want to say drama, but some of the drama I kind of miss. We have our own drama, but
it's funny because we don't have drama like between us or our team. Like, I would say, as like sort of our nuclear team is very drama free, at least from what Meredith and I see in the background.
So circumstantial,
talking to our team.
sure.
But well, I mean, Meredith and I also always talk about, like, I think to Meredith's point, without saying too much, we do see the dynamics between our client teams, right? And on-site at events, as you know, Lisa, like, it's so stressful and the stakes are so high. And we know that all of our client stakeholders, their jobs are riding on this event and the ROI, because some of our events that we have, like, they're spending a lot and expecting so much. And it's like, also a lot of pressure on us. So it's like, no pressure. We know that all of your jobs are on the line based on our production value and all of that. But it's, my opinion is that I get enough exposure to, it's kind of like watching a reality show, right? Because it's like, we don't actually have skin in the game, to Meredith's point, with these different teams. So for me, things will happen and we don't have to go too far into, we have some crazy stories, which we can chat about over drinks sometime, Elisa, but it's, I get enough exposure to the drama of the teams that we work with internally, where I'm like, sometimes Meredith and I look at each other, we're like, we're good. Like, it's a lot.
Totally. But, no, it's a flippant question. Like, I asked it flippantly, but I mean, what you guys have built is so incredible. And, it takes a lot of balls. Like, I think I have an entrepreneurial spirit, but not the like gumption to have pulled the trigger the way that you guys have, and have had a really impressive, like, the way that you've built this from the ground up and fairly quickly as well. It's really awesome as a friend to kind of watch and cheer from the sidelines.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you
so much, especially with such like an industry veteran. And we know that even before we started our company, you worked with a lot of different production companies over the years and agencies over the years. So that means a ton coming from you. So we appreciate that.
What does intentional leadership mean to you these days?
I would say, there's an ebb and flow of teams and budgets, and like that can manifest itself in the work and how much you can actually produce. But for me, leadership really isn't about title or headcount. If you're managing a team or you're just owning a project, if you're driving something forward with purpose, like you're leading. And I try to bring that mindset to everything that I do, whether that's like in a traditional hierarchy or not. So I guess intentional leadership to me is about showing up with that clarity and empathy and self-awareness. Like, I'll be honest, I used to think, like, when I was sort of climbing still climbing the corporate ladder, honestly, but, chasing upward mobility within an organization, like, and I was an individual contributor, like, the next big hump, right, was to become a manager and have a team. And I thought I'd be great at it because, I consider myself relatively high at EQ and I'm extroverted. I kind of just like naively thought that I'd be great at it. And that definitely wasn't the case. I would say that's still not the case. I would say it's like the single thing that I struggle with the most professionally, right? Because events are dynamic, sure, but like people, they're the most dynamic. And if you're trying to engineer an outcome, you can't do that if you don't have a great baseline relationship. And this kind of goes back to the partnership thing, right? Like nothing is transactional. Like no great relationship is transactional. I think you guys do this a lot in your events. Like an event is this ephemeral experience and it can be a blip on the radar, but you're doing it wrong if it's just this transactional thing that happens and then it's over. There needs to be a kind of full life cycle there. So I guess that's just a meandering way to say, I don't know that I have like the single answer. Like I try to sort of show up and figure it out every day.
And also, leadership, it's to me not just about managing people, to your point, but it's also about, you have to manage up, right? You have to, like, when you're a leader, there's a lot riding on you
Right.
from the top down, as well as expectations from the bottom up. And it's an evolution, I think, in the day-to-day process.
But I
Um,
also like what you were touching upon, and that actually comes up, I believe, in a few of the podcasts when we're talking to some of the different leaders, is that on paper, we always, at least in the early days of our careers, I can say that too, a leader was an executive or a manager, but you can lead a project. You can lead so many things without, like, it's not a textbook definition of leading, and showing up with your authentic self and showing up the best of your ability or eagerness to learn is a form of leadership. And it doesn't mean that you have a 100-person team or that you're, a COO of a Fortune 500 company. I think that's something really important to decipher. And if there's any listeners that are kind of early on in their career, I think that that just kind of hit hard with me because I know that early in my career, that's what my definition was. And it's not a linear thing to me.
Yeah, I think that goes back to sort of what I was saying, where I had this assumption that leading would be a breeze. And then my bubble was burst. That kind of taught me that your self perception of your strengths and weaknesses doesn't really get tested until you're in the arena. Like you don't really know until you step up to the plate and take a swing. So, it made me super appreciate the leaders that I had worked with. I'm always kind of clocking, and to your point, Jess, around managing up, like trying to absorb like a sponge, a great leader, and trying to clock when maybe you don't have a great experience and take that on board and emulate that in your own leadership style, because it's an evolution. But it's super important to just have a willingness to learn and to dig in and to show up authentically, like you said, Mare.
I agree with that. I also think that when I think about my early days and learning how to do events, I feel like leadership is sort of just thrust onto events people, even if you're very junior, because you have to lead a lot of things. Even if it's something behind the scenes that nobody sees and it's your sole responsibility, it's like if you don't get that done, then it's going to show and it's going to be very apparent. And all of the pieces aren't going to fit together the way that they should. So I feel like if anybody's early on in their events career or they want to transition into events or anything like that, it's a great way to learn how to lead because there's so much responsibility and so much importance that's put upon you to execute and to get things done. And it's such a visual result that it shows very quickly who's good at it and who's not good at it, and also who's good at leading those and leading the experiences and leading the people who are putting those experiences on, and or the guests that show up to these experiences. It's very apparent, when something falls flat. So I think this industry just, I think leaders naturally gravitate towards events and experiences in that industry in general, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a highly visible role and there's so much executive exposure. And I think like maybe that's not apparent to a lot of people. Like nobody signed up for that necessarily, but it's a trial by fire situation. And so you definitely don't last long if you fold under pressure or you can't have poise under pressure and manage up at least on a project basis, because your leaders, those are, especially in the realm of B2B events, like that's who's stepping on stage and their personal brand is tied up in the brand of their company as well. And so, you have to treat both with care and execute with precision.
It's so true. And that folds right into what I was going to say, like sort of the point that I was making is that I feel like the events industry, when you're in this industry, you have to just put your big girl or boy pants on and get it done, because yeah, I mean, a lot of our clients, like their CEO on stage and they have their own security detail and they are a public facing figure, and their job is not only to lead their company, it's to lead their stockholders, and they're looking at us to tell them what to do. And so it's you get used to it, I think, but it's a lot of pressure because so much is riding on the way things are presented and the way those people are presented and their personal brands, and also just their corporate brands as well. So it's an interesting dynamic. I've never really thought about that and how they are interwoven together, but it's good to talk about for sure. So Elisa, based on your experience, talent, tenure, and where you are in your career, I would love to know what your answer is. So, for someone who's looking to grow in this hybrid space of events, marketing, partnerships, sort of everything that your role spans, and also actually what we do at Prospect Events, what advice would you share with that person who's looking to grow in what we do?
I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to kind of carve your niche and become known for it. So find that thing that comes naturally to you, where there's a gap in the market and your team, like whatever context you find yourself in. And if it doesn't come naturally to you, like if it's something that you're willing to work at until it does, find that thing, make it your edge. So for me, like one of those things is industry watching. So I make it my business to know who's doing what, who's working on what, where the energy is moving in the ecosystem. And like, I really treat that knowledge as a form of currency. If you know the landscape, it becomes easier to build meaningful connections, start smarter conversations, and just show up with like context and confidence, honestly. So that's one thing that I do. That's like a bit like amorphous, like more practically speaking, I time block that. So, every morning I spend 30 minutes reading daily newsletters and headlines from all of the ad trades, Ad Week, Ad Age, Digiday, all of that. And then usually in the afternoon, I have another 30 minutes and I scroll LinkedIn, and not just aimlessly, but with intention. So take note of who's where and what narratives are they speaking on and who works with who or who knows who. And oh, there's this new event that cropped up that everyone seems to be at this week. And like last year, that was nothing. But should I be paying more attention to this to the point where maybe we should be activating next year? All of that stuff, like I'm taking on board and just synthesizing that information, filing it away, keeping a Rolodex, because it's such a people-driven industry, like so many industries are. And that knowledge provides a layer of legitimacy that you can kind of like pre-vet yourself in any conversation so that people are like, oh, this person really knows what they're talking about. It's like the power of compounding interest, right? Like it just gets more and more powerful as time goes on, where you can really make yourself indispensable, honestly.
I love that. That's so smart. And it's a good way to just educate yourself on what is happening, because things are changing constantly, like by the day. It's pretty crazy.
I would say I always, and Jess knows this, but Elisa's always the first person I call when I'm like, do you know about this event? My client's interested in sponsoring. She'll know every single thing about that event. It's kind of crazy, but I always admire the fact that you're always educating yourself and learning, because I think it does take, especially like if there's any listeners that are kind of, early on in their career trying to build it, like it takes a lot of self-motivation what you do. I can't say that I'm that as good as that. Like to take even 30 minutes every day and research stuff is something I would love to do, but I don't always have that type of self-motivation. And I admire that with you. And I think that's such a good skill and something that people should do more of.
I agree.
Yeah, and you guys keep that list in a really different way. I think one of the great things about having a set of industry friends, like, let's be real, we're real friends at this point, but like having your own personal board of directors, if you will, right? Where you like can bounce stuff off of and have a sounding board, because what makes a great team, what makes a great partnership is like when somebody's knowledge or skill sets are a foil of yours versus like, I'm not looking for someone who's a clone of myself. And so, Merit, to pay the compliment back to you, like, everything about every vendor, like who can I go to for AV or printing? And of course, I wish that I had the budgets where I could just hire you guys for everything. But you're so generous with your Rolodex, and that's really different than mine. And so, like, we share that information because, no, that's the social contract, and that's what makes the world go around, right? This is not a zero-sum game. Like, a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say.
I love all your quotes. I'm going to write some of these down.
I love your vocabulary. Like, I just need to remark on your extensive vocabulary. It's very articulate.
It's not ChatGPT, which is great. It's actually her vocabulary.
I mean, I know we've been out, seen you at events, so we've gone out for drinks and dinner, things like that. But, I think you might have a career in speaking at some point. Just
I don't know about that.
And that also kind of parallels, you'll be seeing an episode with Janae Redmond, who's a big industry leader. And she literally said what you said about having a board of directors as people that you know. And she said she has a board of directors that are all women in the space that she goes to when she has questions. So that, I see a big parallel with that.
Yeah, we need each other. It's so important.
Elisa, on every guest episode we ask our guest, what is an eventful moment from your life, your career, or anywhere you can pull from, that is notable to you that you would like to share. So maybe it's a pivotal moment, maybe it's a fun moment, maybe it's memorable, maybe it's negative, whatever that is, let us know. However, I would like to give you the option to share your most eventful moment with Meredith, because I know you guys have worked together, or you've seen each other at work events, and you've become such good friends over the years. So I like to weave in a little bit of fun and hear what you guys' favorite memory is together as an eventful moment.
I love that.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but some moments that we've had to deal with.
Well, I actually thought of a great one, and Mary, you were not there for this one, but I think it's a crowd pleaser, but it is the like most catastrophic event moment, like work event moment that I've had. And I think there's enough distance between then and now that it's appropriate to share it. So I will regale you with that story.
We want some tea.
We got to have a little tea in every episode.
Okay. So this is probably like 2016, something like that. I was at an industry event or my company rather, and I was producing an industry event. It was in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a travel like focused event that happens every year. And my company rented a yacht that we hosted a bunch of clients on. It was a sort of sunset cruise situation, dinner, some content, etc. And we had a bunch of different people travel in for this event. CMO of Lufthansa Airlines rings a bell, and CEO of Dubai Tourism and things like that. And again, I think it's okay that I'm sharing more details here because so much time has passed. And so, we're in South Florida. We're just north of Miami, and we're probably out cruising for, let's call it 45 minutes. And the boat is surrounded by a bunch of other boats with sirens and people board the boat and they're wearing bulletproof vests and they're carrying weapons. And the first thing that they said when they boarded the boat was, raise your hand if you're not an American citizen. And that was exceptionally distressing, stressful. It turned out that this was an illegal yacht charter. And the Coast Guard who was asked to enforce that. There was an issue in South Florida, et cetera. But because the Coast Guard is who they are in South Florida, right? Like they're also dealing with immigration and things like that. And so obviously a horrific moment for not a great client experience, really, really bad. I learned so much from this. I had a brief moment where I took myself below deck and shed a tear and called my best friend who I worked with and my boss and a few others. But, learned so much from that. Like you gotta vet your vendors. I thought this was a legit company that we chartered this boat with. It was not, but you know what? Everyone had a laugh about it. Everything was okay. And it was an exceptionally eventful moment.
That is very
I've never heard that story. Like, do you have PTSD from it and that's why you haven't shared it?
Probably. Honestly, probably.
It could have been worse, I will say. However, I'm sure every single person, including you, as we see now, that was on that boat still shares that story to this day because that is insane.
It honestly was bureaucracy and red tape, something to the effect of like the local government needed to kick back on the way that these charters were handled. Circumventing that. So it was something relatively innocuous, but yeah, not a great client experience. I was definitely in my mid-20s or so, and I was certain I was going to be fired and all the stress that came with that. But you know what? I wasn't, and it was fine.
And you learn it. I'm actually really surprised that took place in the US because, as you know, Elisa, because you do global events and you work in different countries and things like that. Of course, that's something that with so many vendors, we have not the same as that. It doesn't get that far as the experience that you shared, but it's always something to be cognizant of, like, who's legit, who's not, especially outside of the US, because you just never know.
Yeah, and you gotta do your due diligence. Like, if anything, I feel like it's better that happened there than in the south of France. And, as mayor who's done the yacht charter thing a number of times there, like there's so many nuances to that and esoteric laws to the Mediterranean and all of that kind of stuff. So, you live and you learn.
Live and learn.
Live and learn. That's what I say.
That's not the quote of the century. This century in particular. You live and you learn. Well, thank you so much, Elisa, for joining us. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I'm just so flattered that you guys asked me to do this. And I'm so in awe of what you've built. And I appreciate just being a small part of it.
I mean, I would say you're a huge part of it. I know Meredith just counts you as such a close friend, and also you're so talented. And as she mentioned, sometimes we call you up because we need some intel or advice on things as well that's happening within the industry. So we just appreciate you taking the time and hope to have you back at some point. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It means so much to me. And who would have thought almost a decade later that we'd be doing a podcast together after, we were handing out wristbands on the yachts in Cannes. So I don't know. It's really come full circle, but we've both grown up a lot.
We have.
Thanks for listening to the Eventful Podcast. If you loved this episode, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and catch us on Instagram at the handle @theeventfulpod. See you next week.